She seduced the most powerful men in history. She ruled the richest kingdom on earth, and when she died, an entire civilization died with her. This is the true story of Cleopatra.
Egypt in 69 BCE was a land of unimaginable wealth. The Nile brought life to the desert. Pyramids touched the sky, and Alexandria, the crown jewel of the ancient world, held the largest library humanity had ever known. But Egypt's pharaohs were not Egyptian. For 300 years, the Ptolemaic dynasty, Greek rulers, had controlled the throne. They were descended from Alexander the Great's general, and they kept power through one brutal tradition, marrying their own siblings.
Into this world, in 69 BCE, Cleopatra VII was born. She was not the eldest, not the most favored, but from childhood she possessed something her siblings lacked, a brilliant mind. While her brothers played at war, she studied. She learned 8 languages, philosophy, mathematics, astronomy. She wasn't just royal, she was a scholar.
But intelligence alone wouldn't save her. When she was 14, her father died. Her sister tried to seize the throne and was executed. Now, according to tradition, 18-year-old Cleopatra had to marry her 10-year-old brother and share the throne with a child. Cleopatra refused to be anyone's puppet. She tried to rule alone, sidelining her brother entirely. His advisors, old men hungry for control, convinced the boy pharaoh to strike back. At 21, Cleopatra was betrayed, exiled, cast out of her own kingdom into the desert.
But fate was about to deal a new hand. Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in Rome, arrived in Alexandria, chasing his rival Pompey. He found a city at war with itself, and Cleopatra saw her chance. She couldn't fight her way back to power, but she could think her way back.
The palace was locked to her. Guards had orders to kill her on sight. So Cleopatra did something legendary. She had herself smuggled into Caesar's chambers, rolled up in a carpet. When the carpet was unrolled, there she was, 22 years old, speaking perfect Latin, standing before the conqueror of Gaul. Caesar expected a beggar. He found a queen.
They talked through the night. Not just politics, philosophy, literature, strategy. Caesar was 52, battle-hardened and brilliant. Cleopatra was 22, equally brilliant and desperate to survive. By dawn, they were lovers. By the end of the week, they were allies. And her brother's advisors were doomed.
The Alexandrian War was swift and brutal. Ptolemy XIII drowned in the Nile, fleeing Caesar's legions. At 22, Cleopatra was sole ruler of Egypt. To celebrate, she took Caesar on a royal cruise down the Nile. 400 ships, endless feasts, a display of wealth that left the Roman general speechless. He had conquered nations. She conquered him.
9 months later, Cleopatra gave birth to a son. She named him Ptolemy Caesar, but the world called him Caesarion, Little Caesar. Egypt now had an heir with Roman blood. The East and West were bound together in one child.
In 46 BCE, Caesar summoned Cleopatra to Rome. She arrived in splendor, the exotic queen of the East, bringing gifts, scholars, and her son. Rome had never seen anything like her. The Senate was scandalized. The people were fascinated.
But Rome would not accept a king, and it would never accept a foreign queen. On the Ides of March 44 BCE, Julius Caesar was assassinated. 23 stab wounds on the Senate floor. His killers claimed they saved the Republic. Cleopatra fled Rome that night. She had lost her lover, her ally, her protector, but she still had her kingdom, and she would find another Roman champion. Rome tore itself apart. Caesar's assassins versus his loyalists. The Republic was dying. From the chaos emerged three men who divided the Roman world between them: Lepidus, Octavian, and Mark Antony. Antony controlled the East, which meant he controlled Egypt's fate. In 41 BCE, Mark Antony summoned Cleopatra to Tarsus to answer charges. Had she supported Caesar's assassins? She could have sent ambassadors. Instead, she came herself. And she came unforgettably. Her ship was gilded. Silver oars beat in time to flutes and harps. She reclined beneath a canopy of gold cloth, dressed as Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Beautiful slave boys fanned her, attendants dressed as sea nymphs and cupids. The air was thick with incense. Antony had summoned a queen. A goddess arrived. He never stood a chance. Where Caesar had been her political match, Antony became her romantic equal. They hunted together, drank together, ruled together. They founded a drinking club called the Inimitable Livers, a celebration of excess and pleasure. But beneath the revelry was strategy. Together, they dreamed of an empire that would unite East and West. Cleopatra bore Antony twins, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, sun and moon. But in Rome, Octavian, Caesar's heir, was building his power and his rage. Antony had abandoned his Roman wife, Octavian's own sister. Propaganda poured from Rome. Antony was bewitched by an Eastern sorceress who would enslave the Republic. In 34 BCE, Antony made his fatal error. In Alexandria, he held a ceremony called the Donations. He declared Cleopatra Queen of Kings and Caesarion the rightful heir to Caesar's legacy, not Octavian. He divided Roman territories among Cleopatra's children. Rome was outraged. Octavian had the excuse he needed: war. Both sides prepared for the battle that would decide the fate of the world. Octavian built his forces in Italy. Antony and Cleopatra gathered their fleet, over 500 ships, in Greece. Cleopatra insisted on fighting alongside Antony. Her advisors begged her to stay in Egypt. She refused. Where Antony went, she would follow. September 2nd, 31 BCE, the Battle of Actium, the largest naval engagement in ancient history. Over 700 ships clashed off the coast of Greece, but Antony's fleet was already weakened. Disease, desertion, doubt. In the midst of battle, Cleopatra's squadron suddenly broke formation and fled. Antony, seeing her ships retreat, abandoned his own fleet and followed her. His men watched in disbelief as their commander sailed away. Octavian had won. The war was over. They returned to Alexandria, not in triumph, but in despair. Antony fell into deep depression, drinking in isolation. Cleopatra prepared for the siege she knew was coming. She gathered her treasures in her mausoleum, making a final desperate play. If Octavian wanted Egypt's wealth, he'd have to let her live. August 30 BCE. Octavian's legions reached Alexandria. Resistance was futile. Antony's remaining troops surrendered without a fight. Rumors reached Antony that Cleopatra was dead. In his grief and shame, he fell on his sword. But the rumors were false. She was alive, locked in her mausoleum. When Antony learned the truth, he begged to be carried to her. He died in her arms.
Octavian came to negotiate. He wanted Cleopatra alive, to parade her through Rome in chains as his trophy. She knew this fate and rejected it, but she played for time, pretending to negotiate, even trying to seduce Octavian as she had Caesar and Antony before. But Octavian was different, cold, calculating, immune to her legendary charm. He wanted her humiliation, not her love.
Cleopatra asked for one final request, to visit Antony's tomb and perform burial rites. Octavian agreed. She bathed, dressed in her finest robes, ate a magnificent final meal. Then she sent Octavian a letter and sealed the doors to her chamber. By the time he received it, requesting burial beside Antony, she knew what was coming.
The method of her death remains history's mystery. Plutarch wrote that an asp, a venomous snake, was smuggled to her in a basket of figs. When Octavian's guards broke down the door, they found Cleopatra dead on her golden couch, dressed as the goddess Isis, her crown on her head. 2 of her handmaidens lay dead beside her. The last Pharaoh of Egypt had died by her own hand, defying Rome's triumph to the very end. Octavian's rage was legendary. He had been denied his trophy. Cleopatra would never walk in chains through Rome. Even in death, she had outmaneuvered him. He had conquered Egypt, but she remained unconquered. In his fury, he ordered her statues to remain standing, the only mercy he would show. Tragic for Caesarion, then shifting to bittersweet survival for the others. Show the irony of her daughter becoming queen anyway. Caesarion was not so fortunate. Octavian had him hunted down and executed. He could not allow Caesar's son to live. But Cleopatra's 3 children with Antony were spared. Octavian brought them to Rome, where they were raised by Antony's Roman widow. The twins, Alexander and Cleopatra Selene, grew up in the very city their mother had defied. Cleopatra Selene eventually became queen of Mauritania, carrying her mother's blood into a new dynasty. Ancient world. Egypt, after 3,000 years of pharaohs, became a province of Rome. The library of Alexandria would burn. The pyramids would stand, but the civilization that built them was no more. With Cleopatra died the ancient world. The age of emperors had begun. For centuries, Rome told Cleopatra's story as propaganda. She was the dangerous seductress, the foreign temptress who nearly destroyed the Republic. But this version was written by her enemies, by Octavian, who became Emperor Augustus. The real Cleopatra was far more than beauty. She was a strategist, a scholar, a survivor who ruled one of the greatest kingdoms on earth for 22 years. Modern historians have worked to recover the real woman from the legend. She was not Egyptian by blood, but she was the only Ptolemaic ruler who bothered to learn the Egyptian language. She stabilized a bankrupt kingdom. She negotiated with the greatest military power on earth as an equal. Her beauty? Contemporary accounts barely mention it.
What they describe is her voice, her intelligence, her ability to command any room she entered. She ruled in an era when women had no power. In Rome, women couldn't vote, own property, or speak in public. Yet Cleopatra commanded armies, controlled vast wealth, negotiated treaties, and fought for her throne against multiple rivals. She did what few men could do in a world designed to prevent her from doing anything at all. Were Caesar and Antony truly in love with her, or was it political calculation? The truth is, probably both. Love and power are not opposites. Cleopatra chose her partners strategically, but the relationships were real. She mourned Antony genuinely, and both men risked everything for her, which suggests something deeper than mere politics. After her death, Cleopatra became more legend than woman. Shakespeare made her immortal. Hollywood made her an icon. Every age reimagines her for its own purposes: seductress, victim, feminist, villain. The real Cleopatra is buried under 2,000 years of interpretation. But perhaps that's fitting for a woman who understood the power of image better than anyone. We still don't know where she's buried. Despite decades of searching, Cleopatra's tomb has never been found. Maybe it's lost beneath Alexandria's waters. Maybe it was destroyed. Or maybe, somewhere under the Egyptian sand, the last pharaoh still lies in her golden sarcophagus, waiting to be discovered. The Nile still flows through Egypt as it did in her time. The pyramids still stand, but the civilization Cleopatra represented, the ancient world of pharaohs and gods, ended with her. She was the bridge between ancient and modern, between myth and history. She was the last of her kind. In her era, power meant military might. Cleopatra proved that intellect could be just as powerful. She couldn't outfight Rome, no one could, but she could outthink her enemies, outlast her rivals, and die on her own terms. That's a kind of victory that history can never take away. History obsesses over whether Cleopatra was beautiful. Coins show a strong face with a prominent nose, not the conventional beauty of ancient standards. But beauty was never her weapon. Her wit was devastating. Her voice was described as hypnotic. She made people feel like the most important person in the world. That's more powerful than any pretty face. Cleopatra wasn't fighting for romance or adventure. She was fighting for Egypt's survival in a world being consumed by Rome. Every alliance was strategic, every choice calculated to preserve her kingdom's independence. She almost succeeded. If Actium had gone differently, if Antony had stayed in battle, the entire course of Western civilization might have changed. What can a queen who died 2,000 years ago teach us? That intelligence is power, that the underestimated can rise, that you can lose every battle and still refuse to surrender your dignity, that history is written by victors, but truth has a way of emerging, and that one person fighting against impossible odds can leave a mark that lasts forever.
Cleopatra VII Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt. She ruled for 22 years. She loved two of the most powerful men in history. She commanded armies and fleets. She spoke 9 languages and debated philosophy. And when Rome came for her, she chose death over chains. Remember her not as legend, but as she was. Brilliant, flawed, strategic, brave. The last queen of the ancient world, who refused to be conquered. If Cleopatra's strength and wisdom inspired you, please like the video, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching.